So imagine this for a second. What if you had absolutely everything you could ever want? We're talking wealth, power, a perfect family, and then one day you just decided to walk away from it all. Well, that's not some thought experiment. It's the real story of Prince Siddhartha Gautama, the man who would eventually become known as the Buddha. I mean, really, just think about it. A life of complete luxury, a family that loves you, a throne just waiting for you to take over. What on earth could be so powerful that it makes someone leave all of that behind? That's the huge mystery we're going to try to unpack here. All right, so to really understand his pretty radical choice, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning, back to a kingdom that was basically built to be a perfect, painless paradise right here on Earth. So our story starts way back, about 2,500 years ago, in what is now Nepal, in the kingdom of the Shakya clan. Before the prince was even born, his mother, Queen Maya, had this incredibly vivid dream about a white elephant. And when she told the kingdom's priests, they were like, whoa. They said it was a sign her son was destined for some serious greatness, that he'd become a powerful leader. And get this, when a wise sage named Asita saw the baby prince, he actually started to weep. But not because he was sad. No, he was weeping because he saw the boy's incredible destiny. He realized this child would achieve the true liberation that Asita himself had been searching for his entire life. But there was a catch. So right here, you see these two totally different futures laid out. Asita's prophecy said the prince wasn't going to be the king his father wanted. Instead, he'd become a great spiritual leader who would leave the palace behind to find a deeper truth. And his father, the king, was absolutely terrified of losing his heir, so he decided he was going to fight fate itself. And what was his plan? Basically, to build the most perfect, luxurious cage of pleasure imaginable. Siddhartha was given absolutely everything a person could ever want. He married the beautiful Princess Yasodhara, they had a healthy son named Rahula, and he lived in not one but 3 magnificent palaces, one for each season. His father made sure he was never, ever exposed to any kind of suffering. No sickness, no old age, not even a hint of the world's misery. But, well, you can't shield someone from reality forever, right? So let's talk about the moment the walls of that beautiful cage finally came crashing down. So the king finally agreed to let Siddhartha see his kingdom. Of course, the whole route was super carefully planned to only show him beauty and prosperity. But, well, fate had other ideas. For the very first time in his life, Siddhartha saw a sick man, then an old man, weak with age, and then a dead body. And finally, he had a 4th encounter. A peaceful, homeless ascetic, a spiritual seeker who had given up everything and yet somehow just radiated this incredible, unshakable peace. And you have to understand, this wasn't just some casual observation for him. It was a deep, personal shock to his system. He suddenly realized that the suffering he saw, sickness, old age, death, it wasn't some distant problem for other people. It was the inevitable fate of everyone he loved, and of himself. And that thought just completely tormented him. That realization, right there, sparked a whole new mission. He just couldn't go back to living a life of pleasure while ignoring this fundamental reality of suffering he had just witnessed. And so, in the quiet of the night, he made that radical choice. He left his palace, his family, his title, all of it behind. He literally traded his fine silk robes for the simple clothes of a wanderer and began his spiritual quest to figure out how to understand and maybe even overcome all this suffering. And his search was anything but easy. For 6 long years, he practiced extreme self-denial. He joined groups of ascetics and he pushed his body to its absolute limit, fasting to the point of starvation. He got so thin and weak that he honestly almost died. But right there, in his weakest moment, he had this huge breakthrough. He realized his mind was totally clouded. He couldn't think straight. And it hit him. Neither extreme was the answer. Not the total indulgence of his palace life, and not the severe self-denial he was practicing. The true path, he realized, had to lie somewhere in the middle. It was all about balance. So, now that he had this new direction, this idea of a middle path, he was ready for his final confrontation. But this wasn't about fighting some external enemy. It was about facing the turmoil inside his own mind. He found a fig tree, which we now know as the Bodhi tree, and he sat down beneath it to meditate. and he made this incredibly powerful vow to himself. He would not get up from that spot until he found the answers he was looking for. And as he meditated deeper and deeper, his mind's final barriers basically came to life, personified as a demon named Mara. And Mara threw everything at him. He conjured up visions of beautiful women to tempt him with desire, and then terrifying scenes of violence to try and scare him away. Then Mara challenges him directly, asking, "Who's going to witness your right to achieve this enlightenment?" But Siddhartha didn't argue. He didn't fight back. He just quietly reached down and touched the ground. And that simple gesture was everything. It was like he was signaling that the earth itself was his witness. His resolve was as solid and unshakable as the ground beneath him. And just like that, Mara was defeated. And as the sun rose the next morning, Siddhartha Gautama finally broke through. He wasn't a prince anymore. He wasn't just a seeker. He had become the Buddha, which literally means the one who is awake, or the enlightened one. So what exactly did he discover in that moment? Well, he came to understand what he called the Four Noble Truths. And a really good way to think about it is like a doctor's diagnosis. Okay, step 1, the diagnosis itself. Life is inherently going to have some suffering or dissatisfaction. Step 2, what's the cause? Our suffering comes from desire and attachment. Step 3, the good news, the prognosis. Suffering can be stopped. And finally, step 4, the prescription. There is a path to end that suffering. And that prescription, that's what's known as the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, this isn't a set of strict commandments. It's more like a practical guide for how to live your life. It covers everything from how you think and speak to how you act and make a living. It's a whole framework for living ethically, training your mind, and developing real wisdom. This was the liberation he had been searching for all along. So now that he had attained this profound knowledge, the Buddha didn't just, keep it to himself. The whole final chapter of his life was dedicated to sharing what he learned with the rest of the world. For the next 45 years, he just wandered across India, teaching anyone who was willing to listen. He even went back home, where he was reunited with his father and his son, Rahula, who actually became a monk himself. Then, at the age of 80, he gave his last instructions and passed into what's known as final nirvana, a state of ultimate peace. His physical journey was over, but his philosophy, his teachings, were just getting started. And that kind of brings us full circle, doesn't it? The Buddha's entire journey didn't start with some mystical vision from the heavens. It began by him bravely looking at the difficult, uncomfortable truths of life head on. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. If his path to waking up started by confronting suffering, where does yours begin?